Okay, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Gorowski, and I'll be your host for today. It is almost the end of October, but we still have some more October live lessons coming your way. This month, our theme was space exploration, so we connected with astronauts and scientists and engineers who are helping us explore off our planet, into the solar system and beyond, but also turning a lens back on our planet. So I still think we have one or two space events before the end of the month. Tomorrow, we're connecting with Sarah Seeger, who's going to talk about a potential mission to Venus. And then I think on the 30th, we connect with Terry Virts, a retired NASA astronaut, who's going to share some of his experiences. So if you visit exploringbytheseat.com, you can find those lessons and register with your classrooms. And we've got a whole bunch of November stuff coming your way as well. Okay, today we're going to connect with a team out in the field. That is one of our favorite things to do, is to get out into the field and bring the world live to classrooms. We are connecting with the Around the Americas team, who we've connected with on numerous occasions as they've made their way along the west coast of Canada through the Northwest Passage, and they're really making some progress now, so we're going to catch up with them shortly. If you don't already know, it is a 14-month voyage. It launched in May. They are circumnavigating North and South America aboard a 48-foot sailboat, One Ocean. The mission is focused on scientific research, education, and community outreach, all about raising awareness about the health of our ocean. And what's really cool is this mission happened originally back in 2009, 2010. So collecting a whole bunch of baseline data. And now with this journey, we can see how things are changing and make those comparisons. So I'm going to reach backstage now and pull in some of the team. They're a little spread out right now, but there's Grace, there's Tess, and here's the rest of the crew on board the ship. Hey, everyone, how you doing?
Hi, Joe. Thank you very much for having us again.
Of course. It's great to have you with us. Before we do introductions, I'm going to share my screen really quickly here because I think we need to see where you are.
Yeah.
Progress since we connected last. I think when we connected last, you were kind of up in this area in the Maritimes.
That's right.
And you've put a decent chunk of ocean behind you, hanging out in Bermuda.
Yeah, we are hanging out in Bermuda, actually. Speaking of climate change and changing oceans, we had a pretty significant storm as we crossed from the Maritimes up there down to Bermuda. We incurred a little bit of damage, which is pretty much all repaired now. But the other part of it, we saw significant temperatures in the ocean, up to 85 degrees. So that's a big, huge change than what Mark had recorded in 2009-10. It's a lot warmer now. And speaking of warmer ocean, we have Hurricane Melissa to the south of us that is headed directly to our path in the next couple of days. So stay tuned, everybody. We'll keep you updated all the time on what we're going to be, what the challenges we're facing and what we are going to be going through in the next few days. So, yeah.
All right. Well, we have a lot of new crew joining us today. Some classrooms joining us for the first time. So why don't we do just a quick lightning introduction round to set the stage?
Perfect. Okay, so we have on board here, we have got Captain Mark, Co-Captain Jennifer Dalton. We have Mike Beamer, who's our engineer. And then we have on the backstage there, we have our outreach and education coordinator, Tess Shornack, who just left the boat for a week to go home and get some love and tender care from home. And then we have our onboard scientist, lead scientist Grace Dalton here. So that is our crew of 5 that we have on board.
Excellent. Well, it's great to see everybody. Always some kind of adventure happening when we connect. It sounds like this next one coming up could be... Well, it could go in a lot of different directions. So obviously we're wishing for the best. I'm sure you'll hunker down. And ride out the hurricane.
Yeah, we'll hunker down and we'll be prepared, and we'll keep you updated as best we can. So, but we have a very special guest today. Grace will talk about our wonderful partner in this expedition. So go ahead, Grace.
So, hi, everyone. So, we're doing a bunch of research on board. And one of the research projects we're doing on board is working with BC whales, which we will have Jamie and Grace come through later and speak. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about our whale identification that occurs on board. So, since we've been out on the expedition, we've seen quite a few whales, including humpback whales, orcas, and even bowhead whales, which we we found up in the Arctic. And so what's cool is that every whale has unique markings, kind of like a fingerprint. So when we see a whale, when we're just sailing along, we pull out a camera, take a few photos, and write down important things such as their location, behavior, and anything else we notice. And by looking at these photos later, scientists can help identify individual whales by the shape of their dorsal fins, the patterns on their tails, and even scars or scratches. Tracking those individuals over time helps us understand where they go, who they travel with, and how they use their environment. So this information is super important for conservation because this data helps reveal key findings, as in their feeding and breeding areas. They help track ship strikes or entanglements, so it helps us better understand larger threats facing whales. So a lot of this work is done and led by Janie Ray and Grace Bear, and they are in collaboration, and they are the founders and research managers of BC Whales North Coast Cetacean Society. And they've been studying whales along the BC coast here in Canada for years, using photo identification to build long-term records and understand whale populations on a deeper level. And so with that, we're going to pull them both up, and they're both going to dive a bit deeper into some whales.
Hi, good morning. I'm Janie Ray, CEO of the North Coast Cetacean Society, as well as BC Whales.
Good morning, everybody. Grace Bear here, the Research and Project Manager for BC Whales and the North Coast Cetacean Society. We also run a field station on the west coast of BC, and we've actually just wrapped up our field season now, so it's the perfect day to be here speaking to you all.
Okay, well, I think we're going to let Janie take over for a little bit. I think you have a screen share for us hiding out backstage. I'll keep an eye on it to see how it loads. And then when I see it full screen, I'll bring it in and you can take over for a bit, Janie.
Sounds good.
All right, there it is.
All right, so I'm good to go?
Yep, good.
All right, okay, great. Well, good morning. Excited to be able to sit here in a cozy place and talk to you about whales today. I'd like to start off with just a little bit of history as to who we are and how we got to be where we are. So it was over 25 years ago that we actually bought a little boat, a little liveaboard boat, and we traveled up the entire coast of BC. And we were looking for a perfect place to study whales where we could actually live with whales. And we found such a place. It's actually up north in what's called Gitga'at territory. And it's an extremely isolated place. So you can see this station here. And I'll just give you an idea as to where we're actually located. So I'm not sure where everybody is, but here's Vancouver Island, here's Vancouver. So we traveled up the entire coast into this region right here and into this little village called Hartley Bay. And then many years later, we built a little station here called the Finn Island Research Station. So we are very north, but we're also very, very remote. So when you look at this island, when you look down here, you can see this tiny little cabin. Well, that's where we started. And as you can see, we're actually the only people that actually live on this island because we wanted to live with whales and we wanted to try to do research where we had no impact on whales. So we try to do as much as we can from land. And as you can see, that tiny little cabin has actually evolved into quite a robust and fairly large research station, but it is completely off grid. So for power, we have to use solar panels, we have to catch our own drinking water, and we have to go by boat to get all of our food to the station. The whales that we're studying are humpback whales, orca, and fin whales, and all three frequent that area on a regular basis, and a lot of the work can actually be done from the deck of that station. So one of the things we do from that deck is 9 times a day we go and stand out there no matter what the weather is, and we do a 20-minute scan with these big binoculars. You can see Eric standing here and he's actually doing that scan. And while we're scanning, we're going to document every whale, every species of whale, what the whale is doing, who the whale is with, as well as any marine mammals, so seals, sea lions, elephant seals. And we also document every single boat that we see that passes the station. We do go out on the water as well, and we do 2 different types of surveys. Some surveys we actually go out on the water, we actually know where the whales are. So we're going to go to that location, and again, we're going to document what type of whale, what they're doing, who they're hanging out with, and of course, what their behavior is. Other surveys we do are more dedicated in regards to, we call them transects. So we actually know where we're going to go. We have to follow these specific lines as we're doing the survey. And again, it's the same thing. We're just documenting every whale, what they're doing, who they're with. We do most of these surveys in around Finn Island, but some of these surveys actually also go up in around this area here. There's a couple of beautiful whale hotspots. When we get to the area, there can be anywhere from 30 to 50, especially humpback whales in the area. Down in this area, lots of fin whales, and of course, orca can show up anywhere at any time. We also do surveys. You can see these little dots down here. We actually go all the way down to Bella Bella, and then we have people down in Bella Bella actually doing surveys for us as well. So we do spend a lot of time on the water as well as from land. In 2018, not that long ago, we were introduced to drones, and this really changed everything for us. Now, suddenly, we could look at whales from that eagle eye perspective, where you're actually looking down and you can watch their surface behavior in a way that we never could before. And it really opened up a window to what's really going on in the surface, and we were seeing things we had never seen before. And it allowed us to actually gather data in a very different way and different types of data. And one of the most intriguing, I think, ways or techniques that we started to use was we would put these Petri dishes onto a drone, working with Aideen here. She was working to get her PhD. And what she would do is she would fly the drone right through the very top of the blow here. And we would call it the whale snot collector, because literally she was collecting whale snot, which is like your breath. And so what she would do is she takes that back to the lab and she does some analysis, and she can look at the DNA and she can figure out who that whale's connected to. She can figure out what, if it's a male or a female, and all kinds of history that we never had access to before. Another project, actually, this is a project that Grace works on a regular basis from the Finn Island Station, and that's looking at the health, the body health of a whale, especially looking to see if they've ever been in an accident with a boat or entangled in fishing gear. So you look over to your left where this big red circle is, you can see this whale, and there's this this rope behind it. So what had happened is this whale actually got entangled, and we found out later the rope was actually wrapped around the whale's pectoral fin. But the interesting thing is we were actually on the boat with this whale, and we had no idea the whale was entangled. We put the drone up in the air, and we were just like, oh my gosh, this whale is actually entangled. So we brought in, we tried to get a satellite tag attached, but we went out the next day. We couldn't find the whale, but fortunately, it was a whale that we knew very, very well. And we saw the whale the following year, and the whale was no longer entangled. We're not 100% sure of the injuries, but the whale's name is Ivory, and he, because it is a male, seems to be doing really, really well. So that was a good story, but other entanglements actually don't go as well. Over here to your right, you can see this other red circle and this massive injury to this whale. Her name is Habit. She's a female. She's an older female. She's had quite a few calves in the area. And you can see this big chunk that's come out of her dorsal, which, you know, at first you would have thought she wouldn't have survived it, but she did. But ever since she's had that injury, she's never been seen with another calf. And then down here, you can see these prop scars, right? So this whale, a boat would have ran over the whale, but the whale survived. So sometimes, you know, these incidences, the whale does survive, but I'm not sure if you've been watching the news, but recently the whales don't survive. So with these drones, again, we can put them in the air and we can look at if they've had a scar, any kind of scar from an entanglement or a vessel injury, and then we can document whether or not they survived. And it gives us a pretty good idea as to the work that needs to be done to try to protect whales. So this is a really important project, and we've been working on that for many years. And at the moment, we know that at least 40 to 45% of whales in our particular area up along the north and central coast have at one point in their lives actually been entangled in large fishing gear. So the other part of our research is we love to listen to whales. And the only way you can really listen to whales is what we call a hydrophone, which is an underwater microphone. So what we do is we set up these hydrophones or underwater microphones in different areas where we know we have a large amount of whales active at certain times of the year. And if you look over to your left here, you can see this this down here, this is the actual hydrophone. And if you go a little further over, you can see an actual picture of what a hydrophone looks like. So you can see the yellow part is the hydrophone, or it's actually underneath the yellow part. And then this white part is actually a mooring, and that mooring is what settles it to the ocean's floor. And then from that hydrophone, you can see there's a cable, and that cable is actually going to run all the way from the hydrophone all the way up the shore. And you see this part right here. This is a little pelican case, and in that pelican case, there are a couple of batteries, and those batteries then power the hydrophone, and the batteries are powered by the solar panels. So everything is off grid. So all of the calls of the whales within the ocean in this particular region are then transmitted back to the Finn Island Research Station, where Grace actually just left. And so we monitor these 24/7 every day that we're at the station. So we're always listening to whales. Now, because we love listening to whales, and we knew there were other people along the coast that were also listening to whales, we actually reached out to other First Nation communities and other NGOs that were also trying to study the acoustic behavior of whales. And we started what we call the BC Hydrophone Network. So now there's hydrophones along the entire coast of BC, and we're all working together to better understand the language and the habitat use of whales. And whale communication is pretty darn interesting, because every single whale actually has their own voice, they have their own language, they have their own ways of communicating, and it's through this communication with each other that they form very strong social bonds or family bonds. So what I'd like to do is actually start to play some of these calls for you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about each type of whale that we study with a little bit of background, and then I'll play some of those calls for you. So along the coast of BC, we have two main types of orca. We have what we call bigs, or transients, and these are the marine mammal hunters. These are the whales that hunt seals, sea lions, dolphins, and sometimes they even go after other whales. We have another population called residents, and resident orca actually only feed on salmon. And they are phenomenal as well. They have all these different types of dialects. And what I'd like to do is just talk to you a little bit about that resident orca structure. And then again, I'll play some of those calls. So a resident orca, fish eater, they stay in these very, very strong family groups. So what that means is that when a mother has a son or a daughter, that son and daughter is actually going to spend their entire life with her. They actually never leave their mother. Over time, as her daughters start to have more of their own calves and offspring, and then those offspring start to have more calves, that family is growing and growing. And what you're going to end up with is a great-great-grandmother, a grandmother, and a mother. And those, when you get to that point, sometimes these families might break away from each other once in a while, but they always end up coming back to mom. So because they spend their entire life with their mother, what happens is that voice of their mother, or that dialect or that language, is passed on from generation to generation. So within this population along the coast of BC with the northern residents, we have 3 different clans. Each one of those clans actually has their own language. And within that clan, you have a number of pods. And those pods will share that language, but they have a different dialect. And within those pods, you have different very strong little family groups. You've got your mom and all of her offspring. And again, they will all share that same voice or type of communication. So when you think back to those hydrophones, what that means is that when we hear a family of orca, when they're vocalizing and communicating with each other, we can tell just by listening who that family is, who the pod, what pod it is, and especially which clan it is, because this clan or clans are very easy to tell apart because it's actually a different language. So instead of listening to me, you're going to listen to some orca for a couple of minutes. I'm going to play 3 different recordings for you, and I'm hoping, even though it might be the first time you've heard orca, that you'll be able to tell the difference. going to try one more here. And one more. Yeah, so and an interesting thing about the resident orca is because they're feeding on salmon when they're traveling through the ocean, they are pretty chatty. So you know how you see a flock of birds in the tree and they're always communicating with each other? Resident orca are very much like that. They're very, very chatty. So with some of our hydrophones, we can actually look at these little underwater trails that these whales are traveling just because they are constantly talking to each other. But the bigs or the transient orca, they're very, very different. So because they're in hunting mode, they want to be very, very quiet because they don't want the seal or the sea lion to actually hear or know that they're around. So they tend to travel in silence. When they do start to vocalize, it's usually because they've just successfully hunted something and they're actually now eating. So we say, what we like to say is they're very chatty during dinner. So when we get a recording of transient orca, we actually know they've probably just made a kill and they're chatting while they're having that meal. And this is what they sound like. And it's very, very different than the resident orca. So they're very soft-spoken whale. We always refer to them as that. And sometimes some of their calls, they almost sound like cats. It's very, very interesting. But another thing I just want to share with you, because I think it's pretty fascinating, is whether it's a Biggs orca or a resident orca, what happens is that when any member of a family actually catches, whether it's a fish or a seal, they share it. And they do it always thinking about the other whales within the family. So it's not like a, let's say a pack of lions, you know, on a gazelle where they're fighting for the food. These whales actually share it. And what you'll actually see underwater is you'll have one whale actually holding either the salmon or the seal, and the other members are feeding, and they always ensure that the youngest ones eat first. And of course, any one of these whales that is a mother, they always ensure the mothers are eating and the young ones are eating. So we always like to say that with orca, whether you're a transient or a resident, there's no such word as I, it's only we, because they always appear to be thinking about each other. So that's pretty phenomenal. I'm just going to talk a little bit about fin whales. So fin whales are actually the second largest animal on the planet. They can be up to 70 feet long. So you can imagine that's huge. That's larger, probably the size of your classroom that you're sitting in, if not larger than that. They're very long and narrow. As you can see, this is actually a picture taken with a drone. They're very long, narrow whales. And even though they're so huge, they're one of the fastest whales out there. They can travel at great speeds because they're very streamlined. Often they're referred to as the greyhounds of the ocean. Unlike orca, they actually don't have teeth. They have baleen, these top plates of baleen. And so what they feed on is more krill, small schooling fish, and they generally feed at quite a depth when they're in the region. Fin whales have just recently come back to the coast of BC. So in our particular area, we started off with a population of about 6, and now we have over 100 fin whales that we see on a fairly regular basis. They like to come back to the same place at a certain time of the year, and they're pretty phenomenal. And we're just really, really beginning to understand and learn more about their particular behavior. Because they're such a large whale, when they vocalize, it's what we call a very low frequency. So it's so low that we actually can't hear it with our own ears. So what we need to do is speed it up in order for us to hear it, which makes it a higher frequency. Or what we do is we can look at it on a spectrogram. So when you look down here where you see these little orangey yellow dots, that's a fin whale call. And a fin whale call is like a pulse, is what it sounds like. And it's the organization of the pulses that let us know, well, we don't know what they're saying to each other, but we know that there's different things being communicated in regards to the order of these pulses. And it's very, very low. You can see it's way, way down here. So that's a very low frequency. I am going to play it for you because we did speed it up. It might be hard to hear, so yeah, hopefully you can hear it. It's going to be a little bit of a pulse that you're going to hear. So I hope you could hear that. I know it's pretty low and it's very soft, but these whales are very vocal and very chatty as well. So again, because we have these hydrophones in the water, we're documenting their calls all the way. And again, we're beginning to see these underwater, what we call whale tracks, because we have the ability with a number of hydrophones to actually determine where they are while they're traveling. Humpback whales. So again, these whales have truly come back to the coast of BC. When we started doing research, it was very rare to see a humpback whale. Now it's rare to go out on the water and not see a humpback whale. So these whales have really recovered. And it's been a pretty remarkable journey, actually, because we started doing our research at the time that they came back to the coast. So for us, our journey has really focused more and more on humpback whales over the years. And I just want to let you know that this picture here, this is a girl that she's in front of that Finn Island research station that I showed you at the beginning. And you can see how close to shore this whale is. So that's why that station is truly just so amazing, is because these whales come by so close to shore that we can actually identify whales without even getting on the water. Humpback whales actually don't stay here all year long. They will spend the spring, summer, and fall along the coast of British Columbia. But as it gets colder and our days are getting shorter and shorter, these whales will actually start to migrate towards Hawaii and Mexico. And they're going to Hawaii and Mexico to give birth to their calves as well as to mate. When they come back in the spring, they're actually coming along back to the coast of BC because this is where all the food is. So they're actually coming to BC to feed, and they go to Hawaii and the Baja or Mexico not to feed. So actually when they're away during the winter months, they actually don't get to eat very much. So they actually fast during that time. So when you do see these whales coming back to the coast in the spring, they're pretty hungry and they can be pretty skinny. So it's very important that there's a lot of food along this coast to sustain this growing population that we have of humpback whales. And as Grace mentioned, every whale that we see, we actually take a picture of their fluke. So when this whale takes a dive and goes down, that big, beautiful tail comes up. And when that tail comes up, we take a picture of it. And as you can see in this particular picture, every tail is a fingerprint. It is very, very different. So we can actually identify every single one of these whales just by looking at their fluke. And you can see there's all these different color combinations. But if you were to zoom in along the edge here, we call this the trailing edge. Every trailing edge can actually be very, very different, because you'll notice some of these whales are very, very black, right? So when a whale is very, very black, we actually go to this trailing edge to determine who the whale is. And so we take all these pictures, we put them into catalogs. So when we're out on the water and we see a whale and the whale flukes, we can go, oh, that's Ivory, or that's Cross, or that's Yoda, because we name every single whale we see gets a name, and it also gets a number, so we can communicate with other researchers along the coast of BC. And now researchers along the coast of BC all come together, and we're all cataloging these whales and looking at whales and how they're interacting with each other along the entire coast of British Columbia. So this, of course, is a mother and a calf, and this is actually one of my favorite whales. Her name is Notch, and this is one of her little calves down here. This picture was taken quite a few years ago. So unlike orca, humpback whales actually don't spend their whole life together. A calf actually only spends 1 year with its mother. So that mother has 1 year to teach that calf everything it needs to know to survive. That includes teaching the calf where to feed, how to develop bonds, and communicate, of course, with other whales. So again, just 1 year she has for that little one to make it on its own. So the following year, we'll see that calf or young juvenile or subadult come back, and we can follow them because we've been doing this work now for over 20 years. So we're actually been following these whales and their life journey for a very, very long time. And this is some drone footage. I just love this piece of drone footage. So you can see mom here and the little calf. So this little calf, very often, especially when she's at the surface, this little calf is always with her, under her. You see how the peck is opening up for the little calf to come in, which is amazing. But now if you look up here, you can see there's another whale coming into this picture. And this whale is what we refer to as an escort. And years ago, we used to think, well, the escort must be a male. But what we recognize now is sometimes, yes, sometimes that escort is a male, but often it's another female coming in. And what we think is happening is because they don't have these long family bonds, they develop social bonds. So this female may be learning how to be a mother by hanging out with this mother and the little calf. And a lot of times, if you were to watch long enough, this little calf will actually go over and join the other female. So it's pretty interesting to watch how these different bonds develop over time. Another thing, as I mentioned, whales are coming here to feed, and there's a number of different types of feeding strategies. This one over here, a lot of this is happening near the top end of Vancouver Island. We call it trap feeding, where the whale actually sits in a current with its mouth wide open, just waiting for all the herring to get into the mouth, and then the mouth goes down and the whale feeds. This here is a lunge feed, so the whales come up to the surface and it's just skimming the surface, which is pretty sweet to watch. But what we see a lot of up north is what we call bubble net feeding. And when humpback whales bubble net feed, they either do it by themselves or sometimes they do it in massive groups. Sometimes it's 2, 4, sometimes we have up to 14 whales that are bubble net feeding together. So what you'll see at the surface is the group will dive down. So you'll see all those tail flukes, they go down. And then when they're under the water, we start to hear this bubble net feeding call, which I'll play in just a second. But what's actually happening underwater is these whales are working together and they're literally swimming, as you can see here, in this spiral motion. And as they're swimming in this spiral motion, they're actually blowing bubbles. And what's happening is the bubbles are causing the fish, or the herring specifically, to all come up to the surface. And when they get to the surface, boom, they all feed. And I'll show you what that looks like. But first of all, I just want to play what a bubble net feeding call sounds like. And when we hear this call, we know they're bubble net feeding. they just broke the surface. And so now I just want to show you what that looks like from drone footage. So here's that Thin Island Research Station, and you see this circle of bubbles. So you just saw the picture below where they're swimming in this spiral motion. And so on the surface, you could actually see this big circle of bubbles. And I'm going to play the video, and what you're going to see is what it looks like when these whales all break the surface, and they're going to have their massive mouths wide open. And as they close that mouth, they have a huge tongue. The tongue is going to push all the water out, but they have this baleen, and the baleen on the top of their mouth is like a filter, and it keeps all the fish in. So this is what it looks like. That is a large group of whales. And I'm going to show you one more video. This is just a couple of whales, and it's a bit more zoomed in, so you get a better feel as to what it looks like when they come to the surface. So again, you'll see the circle. And you can see the whales are just about to come up. You might even see some herring jumping for their lives. And here they come, big mouths, wide open. And there they go. Yeah, so it's a pretty unique technique, and I can tell you, I've seen it, I don't know how many times, and it never gets boring. It's pretty amazing to watch these massive whales feed at the surface like this. So way back when we started doing this work, back in 2004, we maybe saw roughly around 18 humpback whales bubble net feeding. But what we now know is they've been teaching this technique to each other. And now we actually have close to 270 humpback whales that are known to feed together. Now, that's not 270 at once, but different individuals that are learning how to do this phenomenal technique to forage and to work together. So again, these whales are working together in regards to making sure that they get the nutrients and the calories and the fish that they need to survive and to continue on recovering. So this is all, oops, I'm just going to go back here. So this has all been going on from the spring into the summer, lots of foraging. They're very focused on food. But as we get closer to this time of year and the days are getting shorter, there's a change in their behavior. Now we start to see a lot more robust behavior, and we start to hear tonal blows on the surface, and males are starting to compete with each other. But the other thing that's happening under the water is these males are actually starting to sing these long, beautiful mating songs. And it really is incredible to listen to it. And it really, you know, when you listen to it, you feel almost an emotional response to it, because there's emotion actually coming from the whale. And I think that's pretty incredible. So before they start to sing, they start to do all these different kind of social calls. And eventually these social calls will become a part of that song. So what I want to do is just play little bits of it, and then I'll play the entire song for you. Well, not the entire song, because that would be almost an hour. And another one. So they're quite diverse in the types of calls that they make. And that sounded like a bird, really. So then when you start to put all of these calls together, what they start to do is they're now developing a song. So we think the North Coast might be a practice ground where they start to put different types of calls together. And so before I go into playing a full song, I just wanted to show you what it looks like on a spectrogram. So this spectrogram is a way to visually see what sound looks like. So as I play this next little, just a little phrase I'm going to play, which is part of a larger song. So it'd be like the first verse of a song, let's say, if you were singing a song. And you can see here, this is all these little spots here. Those are points within that song. So I'll just play it, and I'll put my mouse where we are, just so you get an idea as to what sound looks like and sounds like at the same time. Okay, so now I'm going to play the song, and I just want to try to explain to you that what's really amazing about this is that all the humpback whales along the coast of BC, and they're always male, or so far only males have ever been documented to sing like this. They are actually composing the song. And when they compose the song, that song has somehow passed on. And all the males along the coast of BC, and as now they're going to start migrating now, and they're keep singing, they're going to migrate towards Mexico and Hawaii, they are all singing somewhat the same song. And as the singing is happening, the song is constantly changing. And what we don't know is, how are they all agreeing on how and when this song changes? So when they come back next year, the song that we're listening to right now is actually going to be very, very different. So it's a big mystery for all of us, is trying to understand how that's being communicated. But even the bigger question is, how are they all agreeing on that change? Because you're talking about thousands of whales that are doing this. And this song that you're going to listen to, these are all being recorded with all of those hydrophones that I showed you at the very beginning along the entire coast of BC. So let's listen to this one first. Stop it there. So that song actually goes on for an hour, and what the whale's going to do is going to sing each different verse or theme, and when it gets to about the 20-minute mark, it actually goes back and sings it again, almost exactly the same. So that was 1 year, And this was a different year. And right away, you're going to notice that it's very, very different. So we call that the mellow year because that was much more mellow, whereas the one that you heard before, it was much more upbeat and actually quite comical in a few places there. So yeah, just to close it up in a positive way. It's always positive when you're talking about whales. But what we've realized that whales are very, very connected. They have very, very strong family bonds, really, really strong social bonds, and that communication is so important to them. And that way they really do have language and emotion. And yeah, I think it's incredible for all of us to recognize that. And I hope that at one point, if you haven't already, that you actually get to see a whale in the wild, because they really are an incredible species, and we're very fortunate to share the coast of BC with whales. This is just it's so hard to thank everybody. There's so many people over the years that have been a part of the work that we're doing, including Grace Dalton, that's now a part of the One Ocean team, and we're just so very, very grateful. And with that, I'll say thank you very much.
All right, Amy, thank you for that great presentation. I'm going to take it out there. It was really great to hear all those sounds, see those beautiful pictures, the drone shots. It really is great research you've been doing. And the location where you get to do it from looks pretty incredible as well. I'm going to bring in our team from backstage. Oh, there's Tess. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Q&A. If you're tuning in online, I can see some questions already. I'm going to try and grab some classes from backstage as well, see if they have a question for us. So questions about the whales, questions about the expedition and life on the sailboat and things like that, I think are all fair game. So let's just work our way quickly here. Sky's fourth graders, if you're hanging out back there and you want to unmute, we'd love to grab a question from you.
Sorry, I do have one student coming up with a question. Hold on, sorry.
Perfect, sounds good.
Thank you. Thank you, Janie. That was a fantastic presentation. So incredible.
Aw.
We were fortunate enough to see some bubble net feeding. So.
Oh, nice. Oh, I'm really glad to hear that. We've been following you all the time.
Sorry, fourth graders, do you want to go ahead nice and loud? I saw you unmute the mic.
Thank you so much. I have one of my fourth graders here. Go ahead, love.
Okay.
What is the biggest kind of whale?
That would be a blue whale.
All right. And just for perspective, about how big can a blue whale get?
So a blue whale is over 100 feet. So you're looking at about 30 meters, if not a bit more than 30 meters.
Very, very cool. Mrs. Jones, fourth graders, I'm going to pop you in. If you want to unmute, I see you put a question in the private chat, but why don't you go ahead and ask it live if you want to unmute your microphone.
All right. Our kids had the question of how many whales do you all monitor at one given time?
Oh, good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. So it changes. It depends on the type of whale. So if it's fin whales, we might be monitoring anywhere from 6 to 8. But if it's humpback whales, we could be monitoring anywhere from 30 to 50. And orca, the same, anywhere from 10, 20, 30, or 50. It depends on the day and the time of year.
All right, very cool. Mr. B's, fourth graders, I know you're hanging out back there. If you want to go ahead and unmute, we'll steal one of your questions.
Yeah, so we do have a question. Our question is, what is your favorite species of whale to study?
Well, I started off with orca, but I have to be honest, when these humpback whales came to the coast, I don't know what it was, but I fell in love with humpback. So I'll have to say humpback whales, yeah.
All right, humpback whales, pretty cool. Mrs. Anderson's crew, if you want to unmute your microphone and ask a question, we're ready for you. I think, Mrs. Anderson, I think you're there. I see it's unmuted. I don't know if it connected for us. If you want to put the question in the private chat, and I can grab the question from the private chat. While I wait for that question, we've got a crew here. Oh, no, there it is. Miss Anderson's crew is wondering if the whales ever get into fights with each other.
That's a really good question. So, interestingly enough, so you know how we have the two different types of orca? We've got the bigs and the residents. Yeah, they don't get on with each other very well. So I wouldn't say they fight, but we don't know what's going on underwater, but there's definitely some surface behavior that indicates that. But another really interesting thing is that, as I mentioned before, the bigs, they actually will hunt sea lions, right? Well, sea lions have very special relationships with humpback whales. So sometimes when bigs are hunting or about to kill a sea lion, these humpbacks, they come charging in and they will actually break it up. So yes,
wow,
pretty fierce when it comes to bigs orca. They don't like them, I would say, from our experience so far anyway.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, I want to give a huge shout out. All those questions just came from a group in Virginia Beach. So I think we have all the fourth graders in their whole school are hanging out with us backstage. So thank you for those great questions. I know you have to leave soon. So if you want to turn your microphones on and just, say goodbye, we'd love to hear your voices one more time before you have to leave. I know you said you have to leave shortly. So if you do want to turn your mics on really quickly and just say bye. It was great to have you with us. If there are any last minute questions as you're leaving, feel free to pop them into the chat and we will snag some of those. But thanks for hanging out with us, Virginia Beach. It was great to grab all of those questions. In British Columbia, we have a group joining us from Quadra Island.
yeah.
And they have a few questions here in the chat. They would like to know the smallest whale. Connor and Declan are itching to know what the smallest whale is. We know the biggest.
Yeah, we know the biggest, the smallest. Wow. I'm going to go with a little pygmy whale, but I'm not 100%. Don't quote me on that, but I'm going to say a little, yeah, that's what I'm going to go with. Grace Dalton, do you have another answer to that?
Maybe the dwarf sperm whale, but I could also be.
That is what Google says. Google is saying the dwarf sperm whale is the smallest, about 2 meters.
Wow, that is small.
Yeah, there's a dwarf one and a pygmy one. So there's one of each. Very cool. Okay, let's see. YouTube. I have tons of questions on YouTube. So this class is from 4B. They're in Charleston, South Carolina.
Yay!
Yeah, grade 4s. And they would like to know, there's hydrophone network in the Pacific. Is there something similar in the Atlantic?
There is, yes, absolutely. So on the East Coast, there's also hydrophones. There's hydrophones deployed around the entire world. So the whole world is actually listening to whales. And there's even a couple of places you can go to on your computer or your phone, and you can listen to these hydrophones live. So that's actually pretty interesting. If you just Google "listen to whales live," that would actually come up for you. You can listen. You can just listen to the ocean, which of course, even without whales, is pretty amazing.
All right. I'm going to take a step away from whales. Most of the questions are whale related, which is not surprising. But there is one here about the warming temperatures. And this class is wondering, how do the temperatures compare from the last expedition? Do you have like a number for the change in the temperature right now?
Well, good question. Great question. One of the things we wanted to study and find out, the temperature through the Arctic, in the Arctic waters 15 years ago, we saw temperatures above freezing in the water we were going through, and a high temperature then would have been 40 degrees Fahrenheit. This time, again, 15 years later, this time the high temperatures were in the 60s. So almost a 20-degree shift as we were going. So wow. Much, much warmer. where we are right now, I think we're in 80-degree water. I hadn't looked at
Actually, I
it.
think it's in the 70s here, but as we crossed to Bermuda, we
Yeah.
saw 85-degree temperatures. And again, that was
10 degrees
10
warmer
degrees
than
warmer.
we saw 15 years ago. So we didn't go in exactly the same place, but very close on our route map to those places. So significant changes.
All right. I have two questions from students at Fulford Elementary that I want to work in here. So I'm going to ask them as a two-parter. The first one is they want to know how you're catching the whale snot. How does it get into the petri dish? And the second follow-up is, do they ever use their sound to scare other marine animals?
Well, that's a really good. They're both really good questions. Yeah. So on the drone, like sitting on the drone, we have these little dishes. They're called Petri dishes. And so when we fly the drone through the whale blow, all that snot actually as it gets attached to the Petri dish, we bring the drone back down, and then we just swab it and wipe it all up, and we put it into a little container, and then we analyze it from there. And then, do whales ever use sound? So that's an interesting question, because you know that bubble net feeding call that I played when they're bubble net feeding? So we think that call is actually scaring the herring, which is making the herring go into a tighter ball, which is really good for the whales, not great for the herring. But in regards to scaring other whales, that is something we don't know. It is a really good research question, and I'm going to bring that up with other people. But to date, I would say no. Well, sorry, I'm going to backtrack. Every once in a while, we'll hear a humpback whale do what we call a tonal blow. And I don't know, sometimes we think that is to scare away something because it sounds pretty ferocious.
All right. One more question from Quadra Elementary. This is in the chat. Daisy wants to know, what made you decide that you were going to study whales?
I was about 9 years old, and I heard a recording of a humpback whale singing. And it was the first time as a child that I had an emotional response to whales, and that was it for me. I just fell in love with whales.
Yeah. Wow.
All right. So team around the Americas, obviously there's a hurricane heading your way.
Yeah.
Are you, what's going on right now? Are you watching its path? Or would you try to move out of the way? Is the best thing to do just to probably not stay inshore, because there'd probably be the storm surge, so that's probably not good. Right. So what's the plan if it heads in your direction, or do you think you'll have enough kind of warning to kind of move, get out of the way?
Right at the moment, Joe, it's tracked to go directly over Bermuda. So that's where we are at the moment. It should die out significantly. Right now, I believe it's a Category 5, and by the time it reaches, it should be a Category 1, hopefully. So yeah, we thought about different options, but we had sustained some injuries on the boat and physically coming across to Bermuda from the storms we had encountered there. So really we had to do some repairs, and we're going to stay here because we're not going to be able to outrun this hurricane. There's really no real way to track this hurricane at this moment. So we don't have a true sense of exactly where it's going to go until probably tomorrow. Should come over Bermuda by Thursday night, Friday. So our best thing has been talking to locals. Truly, we've had a lot of great local help here, and they've directed us to go down to a little bay, and we're going to anchor in there. We're going to put 2 anchors. We're going to take everything apart on the top end of the boat.
Yeah, take the sails off, any windage. We'll prepare the boat. We've all been doing that today, putting things below and making the boat secure, and then getting 2 anchors, because the wind direction will change as the hurricane, if it goes right over us, it'll come from one direction and then it'll change. So the danger, we feel pretty secure. The boat will be fine. The danger really is from other floating and blowing objects.
Yeah.
A Category 1 could be up to 90 miles an hour. Category 5 is just off the charts at 150. I can't imagine what Jamaica's doing.
Yeah.
But we can be secure in a little harbor as long as nothing else sort of runs into us. And we thought seriously about trying to go in one direction or another, but the forecast, the zone of where this hurricane might go was pretty uncertain. So you could end up, running off east and then running right into it with no shelter at all.
Yeah.
And one of us here has experienced a hurricane at sea, and I think the best bet is that we stay put and anchor and
Sheltered bay.
and take care of the boat.
All right, fair enough. Well, to the classrooms tuning in, if you want to follow along, you can head to oneislandoneocean.com, and then there should be some links there for social media as well. If you want to know what we're getting up to next with the team, you can head over here on our website, exploringbytheseat.com, /lessons, /One Island, One Ocean. We've got 2 events coming up in November. One of them is November 12th, and we're going to do another micro swift buoy drop. I think that'll be our 3rd buoy drop.
Yeah.
And then on the 25th, we'll talk about heat flux and water temperature. So those should be pretty cool. Mark those on your calendars. Janie, I want to just a huge shout out to you. I know Grace was with us, or not Grace.
Yeah, Grace Bear. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh,
the
okay.
other Grace. We call her.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know which Grace, but yeah, Grace. She lost her internet connection.
Yeah, that's okay. I saw her kind of coming in and out, but shout out to Grace. And Janie, thank you so much for sharing the work that you're doing out there. It is really important, and you're getting great data, and you can't beat those songs and that bubble net footage, and it's pretty cool.
And if I can let you know, you can follow BC Whales on their Instagram accounts. They always are updating with different information. So it's wonderful to watch your information. Thank you very much, Janie. And thank you for helping today.
Yeah, no, thank you, everybody. It was great. Thank you so much.
All right. Big shout out to all our classrooms, our backstage classrooms, our YouTube classrooms, our classrooms who will tune into the recording later. Always great to have you with us. Around the Americas team, thanks so much for another great live session. We're looking forward to some November action, and then we'll see what comes next.
All right. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, everybody.
Have a great rest of the week. We'll see you later.
Okay.
Bye.